editing narrated video, and Truong is going to give the talk.
Hi, my name is Truong. I'm from Adobe Research, and I worked on this project with Floraine Berthouzoz and Wilmot Lee from Adobe Research and Professor Maneesh Agrawala from Stanford. So people have been increasingly turning to narrated videos as a way to share and learn knowledge on the web. These videos are comprised of a scripted voiceover with visuals and can be found in many forms, including documentaries.
There are planet's first builders, nature's architects and engineers, crafting homes of spectacular design in every corner of the globe.
Product pitches?
This is Vinely. Vinely uses your taste buds and a little technology to make buying wine convenient and fun.
And how-to videos.
Today, I'm going to show you how to make a really cool stress ball. And we're going to start by making some slime out of corn flour or cornstarch.
Despite their high demand, these videos are non-trivial to create. In order to learn more about common workflows and challenges involved in creating these videos, we talked to a number of different filmmakers. We found that to create a narrated video, editors start by writing a script for their narration, capturing the raw footage and the voiceover audio, and finally editing the audio and the video together. We're specifically interested in this editing step. Editing narrated video involves two time-consuming challenges. The first challenge is matching the footage to the narration audio. Here's a snippet of narration audio for a story on how to make pork ribs.
Line a baking sheet with foil and arrange the ribs with a bit of space between them. The foil makes cleanup easier. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees and stick the ribs in the middle rack, meat side up.
As you can see, the narration audio consists of a story of events that the author wants to illustrate, such as stick the ribs in the middle rack. Yet, in existing tools, this audio is usually represented by a waveform. Editors have to tediously scrub back and forth through the waveform to find the start and the end of a narration event. Once the editor finds her narration event, she still has to find footage to go with it. In order to make sure that they have coverage, editors usually capture a lot more footage than they need in the final story. Here are examples of snippets of raw footage that demonstrate pork ribs being made. As you can see from the clip on the bottom, not all of this footage is usable. All of this footage means that the editor has to do a lot of scrubbing through clips to find relevant footage for a short narration event. In this example, we have 41 total clips for a story that's only 1.5 minutes long. Even within a single clip, the relevant footage is often a small part of the overall footage. For example, let's watch this candidate clip. In this video, nothing happens for a few seconds, and then the actor opens the oven, puts the ribs in, and closes the oven. In total, out of the 16 seconds, only a few seconds in the middle are relevant to this narration event. And often, the raw clips can be much longer than this. As a result, the editor has to do a lot of watching and scrubbing through the videos to find relevant events. After the editor finds a relevant piece of footage, she can associate it with her narration event. The task of finding relevant footage has to be repeated for every narration event, and in some cases, there can be multiple candidate clips for a given event. As a result, this becomes a very time-consuming step in the editing process. Each of these colored blocks represents a different piece of raw footage. The editor's second challenge is to select which of these candidate segments to use for each narration event. These candidate segments are often longer than the corresponding narration event, so the editor also has to decide how to cut the video segments in a way that produces a nice final composition. This takes time because it requires a lot of tedious frame-by-frame editing. In summary, editors have two time-consuming challenges when creating narrated video. Those are matching relevant footage to the narration events and choosing from candidate video segments and cut points. These challenges are so time-consuming that it can take editors between 2 to 5 hours to edit 1 minute of output video. Our work addresses these two challenges. Before I describe our system in more detail, let me cover some related work. There's been a lot of work focused on fully automated approaches to editing video using film editing guidelines. While we also use some of the same guidelines, our approach is semi-automatic and focuses on satisfying user-specified constraints between the narration events and the video segments. We visualize these narration events using time-aligned text transcript. There's also been a lot of previous work on tools to search and edit video, which is done by aligning the text with the footage. Unlike these tools, QuickCut uses these transcripts to help the editors match and align raw video footage to the voiceover narration. Later in this session, you'll hear from Valentina and Amy, who also use these timeline transcripts. While they focus on authoring the voiceover recording and critiquing the edited composition, our project focuses on editing the video given a recorded voiceover. Now I'll give you an overview of our interface and how it makes it easier for editors to match the footage to the narration event and to select cut points and candidate segments. The editor wants to make a video on how to make pork ribs. She's written her script, recorded her voiceover, and captured her footage. Now she loads all these into the QuickCut interface. QuickCut aligns the voiceover audio to the narration script and shows this time-aligned transcript in the transcript view on the left-hand side. The editor can select text in the transcript to play back the corresponding audio.
One of my favorite super easy things to make for large groups is dry roasted pork ribs.
The editor uses this transcript to navigate the audio content, which saves her time over having to scrub through a waveform. The raw footage is split into semantically relevant segments associated with text descriptions of what happens in each segment. I'll go into detail about where these descriptions come from and how the segmentation is done later. These segments are displayed in the footage selector, and the editor uses the segments to navigate the video content. At the center, the editor has a structured timeline where she creates alignments between the narration text and the video footage. The editor starts by selecting text in the transcript to specify a narration event. Every time the editor does this, QuickCut automatically searches the video segments for footage that may be relevant. The top matches are returned in the footage selector. This allows the editor to quickly match relevant footage to the narration without having to scrub through videos. The editor then previews her segments in the playback monitor and drags the desired segment onto the structured timeline to associate it with the narration event. In the case where more than one video segment matches the narration event, the editor can also drag these clips onto the timeline and specify that either one or all of them should appear in the final composition. The editor continues to create these alignments until the entire timeline is filled out. Then she hits the Generate Composition button, and QuickCut stitches the footage and the voiceover together. QuickCut uses video editing conventions to pick from alternatives and cut points so that the editor doesn't have to. I'll go into more details about this later. Here's a snippet of the pork ribs video generated using QuickCut. QuickCut decided amongst the alternatives and cut points so that the segments are relevant to the steps described and don't include bad footage.
One of my favorite super easy things to make for large groups is dry roasted pork ribs. Every time I make these, people ask for the recipe, so here we go. Start by picking up some back ribs. I find this recipe works better for ribs that are not too meaty, so try to find ribs with a high bone-to-meat ratio. Trim off any excess fatty bits, and then season both sides with salt and black pepper.
Now I'll go into more detail about the technical components supporting the QuickCut interface. First, QuickCut transcribes and time-aligns the narration voiceover using an existing phoneme matching algorithm. Then, QuickCut segments the footage into semantically relevant subunits called annotation segments. The system does this by allowing the user to provide audio annotations for the raw footage and transcribes and time-aligns these annotations to the raw footage. Both of these inputs are fed into the interface where a text matching algorithm is used to find the correspondences between the narration text and the annotation segments. Finally, when the editor generates a composition, QuickCut computes the optimal combination of segments and cut points given the user's specified alignments. Since I don't have time to go into detail about all these techniques, I'll focus specifically on the footage segmentation and cut point and candidate segment selection algorithms. To help users find suitable footage, QuickCut automatically segments the raw footage into actions that are relevant to the story. Since actions tend to correspond to motion, QuickCut starts by dividing the raw footage into motion segments and static segments. In the video, the motion segments are highlighted in green, while the static segments are highlighted in red. While these motion segments tell us where actions start and end, each motion segment might not align perfectly with one action. Additionally, they don't tell us what these actions are. For this, we need input from the user. Before editing in the QuickCut interface, the editor first annotates her footage by watching and describing out loud what she sees as the video plays.
Opening the oven. Putting the ribs into the oven. Closing the oven.
QuickCut captures, transcribes, and time aligns these annotations to the raw video clips. Though these annotations give us a rough timing of when the actions occur, these timings aren't accurate. Here are the input annotations the editor generated. Notice how the segments are quite short and how the user starts annotating after the event begins and finishes speaking before the event ends.
Opening the oven. Putting the ribs into the oven. Closing the oven.
We combine these input annotations with our motion segments to predict the boundaries for each action. QuickCut does this by extending the boundaries of the annotation into to the edge of the motion segment into which it falls. For example, here's the opening the oven annotation segment, and here's the motion segment that it falls into. We extend the annotation to become the full length of the motion segment. However, this simple approach can lead to problems. For example, here are the other two input annotations. They fall into the same motion segment, so when we try to extend the annotations using this motion segment, they overlap even though each annotation describes different content. To remedy this, we inspect the overlaps frame by frame and use image similarity measures to find split points between the actions. Here are the resulting annotation segments. This is opening the oven, putting the ribs into the oven, and closing the oven. We ran this segmentation on all of our data sets. Later, I'll show you 6 videos created using QuickCut. The editors who created these videos used the generated annotation segments 144 times. In order to ensure that each video segment had enough material to cover the corresponding narration event, QuickCut automatically extended 24% of these annotation segments with adjacent motion segments. And though QuickCut allowed users to manually specify and adjust in and out points, no one ever did this. Now, given these annotation segments, users can form alignment constraints to specify that the video specify how the video can roughly go with the narration. They can choose from 4 different types of constraints. The basic constraint lets the user specify 1 annotation segment for 1 narration event. The alternatives constraint lets the user specify multiple annotation segments for 1 narration event, and the system chooses 1 for the final composition. The ordered grouping constraint lets the user specify a sequence of segments for 1 narration event, and the system has to figure out how to use all of them. Finally, the point-to-point constraint lets the user specify that some specific moment in the video segment must coincide with some specific word in the narration event. The system now has to make some choices. Given the alternatives constraint, the system has to choose which of these candidate segments to use, and given the basic alternatives and ordered grouping constraints, the system has to choose where to place the cut points. The system wants to make these decisions to avoid visually unappealing artifacts. Specifically, we want to avoid out-of-focus blur, camera shakes, and jump cuts. Notice how a jump cut will appear here because the 2 adjacent video segments are too similar. We formulate an objective function that penalizes these artifacts. In this objective function, the frame cost evaluates the quality of the video and expresses the blur and camera shake penalties, while the transition cost evaluates the change between 2 adjacent frames and expresses the jump cut penalty. We minimize this optimization using dynamic programming. Here's an example of our frame cost at work. I'll play both videos at the same time. Notice how our optimized version is a lot less shaky than the unoptimized version. And here's an example of the transition cost at work. I'll play the unoptimized version first. So right now, this is the first segment. Here's the jump cut, and this is the second segment. And here's our optimized version. Notice how our optimized result chooses a different video for the first segment to avoid the jump cut. We tested our system by producing 5 sets of results consisting of instructional and product pitch videos. We captured footage for 2 of these results ourselves, and obtained the other 3 from students in an introductory HCI class. The 6th dataset comes from an interview promoting a research lab, and we asked a professional filmmaker who captured the footage to edit it using QuickCut. For each minute of final output video, users spent 8 to 31 minutes annotating and editing our system. This is at least a 9x speed up from the reported 2 to 5 hours that it takes to edit a minute of video given existing tools. Here's another example of a result produced by our system. Notice how the video is aligned to the voiceover such that the actor's actions illustrate the narrator's words.
Feeling hungry? So is Ash. But Ash uses Umami to keep track of delicious restaurants. She can check ratings, hours, and reviews of all the places she wants to eat at. She can even check the menu or call them from Umami.
We showed our interface to 3 professional filmmakers and 1 novice for informal feedback. Everyone strongly appreciated the audio annotation workflow and found the annotation segments and text-based search to be extremely useful. We also showed our results to 10 viewers and asked if they thought the results were acceptable to be shared online. A majority of the reviewers responded that all of our results are acceptable for class projects and on YouTube, and some of the results are even acceptable for broadcast TV. We further asked the original Dugu and Umami editors to compare their edits with the QuickCut edits. They reported that the QuickCut edits were comparable and publishable after adding text overlays and stabilization. While we were able to reduce the amount of time that the author spent editing narrated video, our approach still has limitations. First, we assume a fixed narration. This means that the authors can't interleave the editing of the narration with the editing of the video footage. We also assume a constant speed for the audio and the videos and don't allow scaling the length of either. This is limiting if the author wants all of some video segment to occur exactly with all of some narration event, but the narration event and the video segments have mismatched timings. We plan to address these limitations in future work. For more results, please visit our website. And finally, I'd like to close by taking a minute to remember Floraine, who passed away unexpectedly while we were working on the project. She was a brilliant researcher and a caring friend and mentor, and is sorely missed by many of us. And that's it. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Anne. Any questions from the audience? Please raise your hand.
My name is Kunu Park from KAIST. So thanks for your great presentation. You mentioned that at the beginning of your presentation, mentioned about the documentary. So for the case of documentary, the length of the full video is much longer than short commercial videos. So, and with your system, your system will slice the whole footage, and it's gonna be a huge amount of it. So, do you think that your system is scalable for much longer videos, and do you have any potential problems that you expect on those cases?
Yes. So our system. In some cases, we make sacrifices in some of our algorithms where we don't use the most refined techniques, but we use simple techniques that work because those save us time in the pre-processing and in the optimization. I imagine that for a 2-hour-long video, while it might still take on the scale of maybe 20 minutes or so to compute the final output, I think in the long run, compared to how much it would take to edit the video using existing tools, it would still save the user time. Because, for example, if you imagine a 2-hour documentary, that can take on the orders of weeks to create. And so I guess 20 minutes doesn't sound like that much compared to weeks.
Any other questions from the audience? We have time for one more question. So I have one question. You're using the narration or script as a timeline, right? Which is very different from traditional video editing tools. So I was wondering whether, do you think that you can integrate your UI in existing video editing tools? In that case, you have the automation at the same time, give enough creative controls to the video editors? Or do you think these two approaches are fundamentally different?
I think that we actually need to integrate both tools together, retaining different aspects from both tools. This tool gives the editor semantic context, but I found through the user study that timing context is really important as well, and that's something that is represented by a timeline. So if there, I'd like to look into a dual interface where you can actually transform between the two interfaces, because I don't think that it's possible to have one representation that will suffice for everything.
Thank you very much. So let's thank our speaker one more time.